Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us in our BCST 2219 training video on the Sony FS700. And thank you to Eclipse Pictures for helping us produce this video. So when you book out the FS700 camera package from BCIT, it comes with a few components. The first, of course, is our camera, the Sony FS700, and we have a Canon lens that's on this camera by default when you get it. We do have an adapter, which we'll talk about in just a minute, so you can actually put your own Canon lenses on if you require that. In the case, there's a viewfinder hood. This hood allows you to see the LCD screen outside when it's bright and sunny, and it also magnifies the screen a little bit, which makes it easier to see the fine detail. Included in the kit is also a short shotgun microphone with an XLR cable, and this will allow you to get some field audio. Because the camera has no internal microphone, you have to install an external microphone to get any audio if you don't plug mics in. So we're going to talk a little bit about the camera, and to start off with, I just want to talk about the lens at the front of the camera here. Like we said, this camera comes with a Canon lens on a Sony camera. We've determined that most students have access to Canon field gear, so this Canon lens is an easy one for students to borrow or rent, where the Sony lenses that come with the camera are not as easy to find. This lens adapter at the front of the camera is made by a company called Metabones, and it adapts from the Sony E-mount lens to the Canon EF mount lens plate. There is a series of gold pins in the front of this camera. These gold pins allow the camera to transmit and receive data from the lens when it's in use, and we do find that occasionally these gold connector pins get soiled or get some skin oil on them, which prevents good communication with the lens and will cause the camera to start generating error messages and potentially even freezing up. So if you find that kind of issue happening, you'd want to clean the gold connectors on the camera, on the adapter, and on the lens itself to ensure that you have a good signal connection all the way through and that the camera can communicate with the lens. So we'll put this all back together again quickly. Just a matter of aligning all of the the red dots on the lens. Okay, put it back all in position. So with the lens on the camera, now we want to talk about power for the camera and recording media. So on the back of the camera, we have the battery compartment, which is quite large. It takes the Sony F970 lithium batteries. There are also some smaller capacity batteries that will fit as well, but these are large capacity lithium-ion batteries and will be good for the camera for at least a few hours of shooting time. So to put it in the camera, we'll place it in the compartment at the back and slide it over until it clicks. And now it's ready for use. To remove the battery from the camera, you have to press the release button on the side. It does say battery release. It can be hard to find if it's dark, but you press that battery release button in, and then you can take the battery and slide it over to the side and pull it straight out and replace it with a new battery. So I'll put it back in and lock it. Put a memory card in. So standard SD memory cards, class 10 or higher. You open the memory compartment door and place the memory card in the camera with the gold connectors on the SD card facing out, and it should click into position. So it's clicked into position. I can close the back door on the camera. And when we're back here, I might as well also talk about camera outputs. There are two connectors on the back of the camera for connecting display devices. One is a 3G HD SDI connector for HD video. And there's also an HDMI connector on the back for attaching monitors directly to the camera. You can use them both simultaneously. On the top of the camera is the viewfinder. So I'm going to open up the viewfinder and reveal the screen, which is a touch screen. And although it's a touch screen, we really don't want you touching it too much because it does leave a lot of oily fingerprints and can damage the screen. All of the controls on the screen are also accessible through the directional pad. The directional pad, which is located on the back of the camera, you can use left, right, up, down, and the execute button in the middle to select your options when you're working with the camera menus. There is a power switch at the back of the camera. You have to press down the green button and slide it over to turn the camera on. Your start and stop recording button, as well as the volume controls for volume up and down, which only affect the headphone jack at the back of the camera directly below this control. At the top of this control section, there are transport controls for stopping, pausing, previous and next clip, and playing the clip as well. On the side of the panel here are your audio controls. So you have input selectors for input 1 and 2. The inputs are on the side of the camera, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. You can have them set to either auto levels or manual levels. Naturally, at school here, we're a fan of the manual levels, and you can use the control pots on the top here to select your audio level. Set it wherever you need it to be. While we're talking about the screen in the back of the camera here, I'm also going to show you connecting this viewfinder adapter. The viewfinder adapter has little mounting lugs here on the side, which just clip over the side of the viewfinder on both sides. So you'll clip them on and then tighten them. This will secure the viewfinder adapter to the viewfinder and will hold it in position. If you find that it's too loose and it's moving around, you may need to tighten or loosen this control wheel on the side. It's a friction adjustment. When you tighten it up, it stops it from tilting or panning. And if you loosen it off, then you can move it more freely. This viewfinder adapter, you can release at the bottom to flip it up out of the way, and then you can still access the screen and see your controls and see the picture when the camera's turned on. I'm going to take it off now for the purpose of this demo, but it's there if you need it. So I'll now power up the camera with the slider switch at the back of the camera. And my colleague Ken was generous enough to lend us his portable monitor. So I'll plug this into the LCD monitor into the HDMI port we talked about earlier. And we should see an image show up there shortly. I do have the lens cap on this camera right now so that the menus show more clearly. I'll take it off in a bit when we do a white balance. Okay, so with the menus up on the camera, the first thing I want to do is go and format the memory card. So to do that, I'm going to select the menu button at the back of the camera, and when that's selected, you can see the camera menu appears. I'm going to use the directional pad and scroll down to the other menu, which is the one at the very bottom. Click into it and go down quite a ways until we get to the option to format the media. Media format, there we go. Select that. I have two options I can select. There's memory card, which is the SD card I put in the back, as well as FMU, which is a flash memory unit that we actually didn't buy for this camera. It's an additional add-on that we didn't need. I'll format the memory card. It says 13 seconds. So I'll go down to OK and press the OK button with execute. It's pretty quick. That wasn't 13 seconds. And then I'll press the execute button to exit the media format menu. And now I'm back to the main camera menu. Before I do any shooting, the next thing I'd want to do is set my recording format. So again, we'll go back to the menu. This time we're going to go to the camera options, which is helpfully shown as the camera icon on the side of the screen. And I want to go and select, I can select my gain and my ISO settings for how sensitive the camera is to light. I can limit those if I need to, but the more important thing I'd want to look at here is perhaps the white balance, if I want to use a preset option, or if I want to dial in a manual white balance temperature, I can select that here. Re-entering the menu one more time, the next option down is record and output settings. So I have options here to set the recording capability of the camera, the resolution and the frame rate, as well as set the video output settings, which will be feeding external monitors like this. If I had the flash memory unit, I could use the record setting or the media selector select between the memory card and the flash memory, but I only have the memory card right now, so it won't really do anything else. I'm going to go to the record settings option and set, in this case, the record format is 1080 30p, and I have a choice between 1080, 24p, 30p, and 60i, as well as 720p if that's what you want to use, but most times you're not going to need that. When you make a selection, the camera is going to reboot and change the resolution. In this case, I selected the 1080 24p mode. And you would also need to check in here if you want to set the quality of the recording. Now, I picked the FX quality, which is the highest quality mode. You also have FH, and in some cases, if you scroll down, you can actually pick lower quality modes. But in this menu selection, the top option is always the highest quality. So 1080 24p FX is a higher quality than 1080 24p FH. It's a little cryptic, but that's sometimes Sony's menu system. Okay, so now we've talked about formatting the memory card, we've formatted it, as well as setting the record quality. So we're recording in 1080 24p right now. The next thing I want to do is get a white balance. And to do that, I need to talk about the menus on the side of the camera, all the controls, and what they do. So on the side of the camera, there are controls for the gain, which can be low, medium, and high, and that changes how much the light is amplified by the camera's electronics, allowing for a darker amount of light entering the camera, which will be electronically amplified for a brighter picture. There is the A and B presets, as well as the camera preset we just looked at in the menu, where you can dial a preset in and select the color temperature you want, as well as this little button that has the flower over top of it, where you actually perform the white balance. There is a scroll wheel that allows you to scroll up and down and select menu options, as well as click it in if you need to make the menu option active on the screen. There are controls on the side for auto and manual. This is when you're in the auto position, it overrides all of the other camera options and makes it full auto, which is probably not something you generally want. There's also options for picture profiles, for setting log mode and flat and other settings in here, which are too much to talk about in this introduction video, but they're there when we get to production use on the camera. There are buttons on the side for your gain and ISO setting. This white balance button here toggles between a auto tracking white, where the camera determines the white balance automatically based on your scene, as well as setting your shutter speed. Now, it's important when we're setting a white balance to make sure we're in a mode where we can actually set a white balance preset for either A or B. So in this case, I'm in the A position, and if we look at the viewfinder, you'll notice that on the viewfinder, there's a white balance A that shows up there as well. And that means I can actually white balance with this A position and take a custom white balance. If you had pressed the button on the side of the camera for white balance, and I'll do that right now, on the viewfinder screen, you're going to see that that option disappears. And now the camera is trying to determine the white balance on its own and can even adjust on the fly as you're recording. And that can make your white balance drift as you're shooting a scene, and it's not really that useful. So most of the time you want to press the white balance button and see the either A or B preset showing on the screen, and that means you can actually store that memory position with your custom white balance. So I'll take the lens cap off the camera now and stand up a piece of paper, and we'll do a white balance. Okay, so I'm going to shoot the piece of paper with my camera. We'll zoom in, try and fill the frame a little bit. I may have to adjust the iris up or down to get a good exposure. If it's overexposed or underexposed, it's not going to take a good white. And then with that selected, I can go and press the white balance button on the side of the camera, and the white balance will shift, and I'll get a new white balance, and the camera will show the white balance temperature there. So I'll click that one more time so you can see it. And it picks up, in this case, 3,500 degrees Kelvin, which is appropriate for these studio lighting conditions. So now the camera is set with a card that's formatted. I have a white balance that's set. I've set an iris position on the side of the camera with a little scroll wheel, which is right here. Scroll wheel is on the side of the camera for your iris, and if your iris up, if you roll this wheel up, it iris is up. If you roll it down, it iris is down. There are controls here that say iris push for auto, as well as push for focus auto and manual focus. If you try and select these, the camera is going to throw an error message, which I'll try and demonstrate right now. So I'll put it into auto mode, and it says cannot execute functions because of the condition of the lens. What it means is because this is a Canon lens on a Sony camera, it can't control it, so it just says I can't do it and throws an error message. So don't be too freaked out. It doesn't mean that your lens is broken or anything. It just means you don't have that auto control. We're in manual position, so we have to make sure we're set. The camera does have neutral density filters at the front here, so by flipping this little toggle wheel up, you can add neutral density to your lens, and for bright sunny conditions or for special shooting circumstances, you can select whatever level of ND that you need for your production. Okay. Now, just wanted to talk about audio a little bit. The audio inputs for this camera are kind of hidden on the side. So to reveal them, you have to open the trap doors on the side of the camera. So the first audio port is on the back, standard 3-pin XLR. There's also a second audio input at the front here, which is normally used for that short shotgun microphone that comes with the camera kit. So you can plug in your mics as necessary. There is a mode select button on the top of the camera, which can be used to toggle between video mode and still mode. Most of the time, video mode is what you're going to want to use. And there is a separate trigger for shooting stills on the side of the camera, which we're probably never going to use. But if you do need to shoot stills, there is a photo button on the side here. It's kind of hidden by this trap door, but you can press a button right here for taking still photos with the camera as well. One other option this camera has, and one of the really popular reasons to use it, is because it supports a super slow-mo mode, which shoots up to 960 frames a second in sort of a standard definition quality, or up to 240 frames a second in full HD. So when you're shooting in 960 frames a second, for every 1 second of footage you shoot, the camera will record 32 seconds of actual footage on the memory card. At a slower frame rate, like 240 frames per second, it'll record 8 seconds for every 1 second of real time. That is something we don't really go into in this video. Stand by for a future video that follows the super slow-mo options on this camera. Just know that when you record in super slow-mo, it records to the camera's internal memory and then has to dump it to the SD card, which could take potentially up to 5 minutes if you totally fill the buffer completely. And that's a short introduction to the Sony FS700, and hopefully you'll look at this camera more in the future for your productions.